My sister left her 8-year-old daughter with me in my tiny rented apartment. She swore, "I'll be back in 2 days." But she never came back. Not in a week, not even in a year. 10 years later, she showed up out of nowhere and coldly said, "I'm taking the girl." And that's when my niece did something that left me completely frozen. I still remember that evening like it was yesterday, though 10 years have passed. I was sitting on my worn-out couch in my one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, clutching a mug of lukewarm tea between my palms. Rain drizzled outside, droplets tapping against the window with monotonous insistence, and the room smelled of cheap air freshener and boiled buckwheat, the scent of my modest, predictable life. I worked as a manager at a small electronics store, earning just enough to cover rent and bills, nothing more. I was 28, single, and my life ran on rails. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I didn't complain. This was my life, quiet and comprehensible. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my sister Kate standing on the threshold with an enormous suitcase and a small girl clinging to her leg. Mia, my niece. 8 years old, thin braids, eyes full of worry. I'd only seen her a couple of times in my life at Bias. Kate had moved to another city right after her daughter's birth, and we barely communicated. Sometimes she'd send photos through messenger apps, brief messages like quote to, but no details. Our family was like that, scattered, detached, everyone surviving on their own. Quote G3, Kate said, and there was no warmth in her voice. No apologies, just exhaustion. She looked worn out, dark circles under her eyes, dishevelled hair, wrinkled clothes as if she hadn't slept for days. "I need your help. Urgently." I silently stepped aside, letting them in. Mia slipped past me without making eye contact, dragging a small backpack that looked too heavy for her narrow shoulders. She sat down on the edge of my couch, hands folded in her lap, staring at the floor. Kate dropped the suitcase in the middle of my cramped hallway, with a thud that made my neighbour's dog start barking through the thin wall. Quote, 5, Kate said, not even sitting down. She was already rummaging through her purse, pulling out her phone, checking something on the screen. Quote, 6. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, delivered with the casual authority of someone who expected compliance. I looked at Mia, then back at Kate. My sister had always been like this. Impulsive, chaotic, appearing and disappearing from people's lives without warning or explanation. Our mother used to say Kate had, quote, 7, that she'd never settle anywhere. I used to think it was romantic when we were kids. Now it just seemed irresponsible. Kate, I work full time. I started, trying to keep my voice even. I can't just... It's 2 days, Sarah. She cut me off, her tone sharp. 2 days. You can't help your own niece for 2 days? After everything? After everything. I didn't know what quote 12 meant. Kate had left home at 18, moved from city to city, got pregnant, never told us who the father was, and raised Mia somewhere far away with minimal contact. I'd sent money a few times when she asked, birthday cards, small gifts for Mia. But everything? What did I owe her? Still, I looked at Mia again. The girl hadn't moved, hadn't said a word. Her fingers were twisting the hem of her worn pink t-shirt, and I could see the tension in her small shoulders. She looked terrified. Fine, I said quietly. 2 days. Kate's face didn't change. No relief, no gratitude. She just nodded, like she'd expected nothing less. She crouched down in front of Mia, gripped her shoulders, and said in a voice that was meant to sound reassuring but came out flat, quote, 16. Mia nodded, still not looking up. And then Kate was gone. Just like that. The door clicked shut behind her, and I heard her footsteps echoing down the stairwell, fading into silence. I stood there in my hallway, staring at the closed door, at the abandoned suitcase, at the small girl who was now my responsibility. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. The rain kept drumming against the window, relentless. Quote, 17. I asked, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet. Mia shook her head without looking at me. Quote, 18. Another shake. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have kids. I didn't know how to talk to them. I sat down on the couch next to her, keeping a respectful distance, and tried to think of something comforting to say. Nothing came. So we just sat there in silence, two strangers thrown together by my sister's chaos. 2 days turned into a week, then 2 weeks. I called Kate's number, no answer. I sent texts, delivered, never read. I tried reaching out to old mutual friends, distant relatives, anyone who might know where she was. Nothing. It was like she'd vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a suitcase full of Mia's clothes and a half-written note in the side pocket that said, "Back soon, I promise." At first, I kept waiting. I'd check my phone obsessively, jump at every notification, convinced it would be Kate saying she was on her way. I told Mia every night, quote, 20. But Mia never asked. She just nodded, eyes distant, like she'd heard it all before. A month passed, then 2, then 6. Somewhere in that haze of time, I stopped saying, tomorrow. I enrolled Mia in the local school, a bureaucratic nightmare without proper custody papers, but I lied, forged signatures, did whatever I had to do. I moved us into a slightly bigger apartment, stretching my already thin budget to breaking point. I learned to cook meals a kid would actually eat, to braid hair without pulling too hard, to check homework and sign permission slips and show up to parent-teacher conferences pretending I knew what I was doing. Mia was quiet. She rarely cried, rarely complained. She did her homework without being asked, helped with dishes, folded her own laundry. She was heartbreakingly responsible for a 9-year-old, and I realised with a sinking feeling that this wasn't new for her. She'd learned early how to take care of herself, how to not be a burden. It made me furious at Kate in a way I hadn't been before, not just for leaving, but for what she must have put this child through before she left. But slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, Mia started to open up. She began drawing pictures at the kitchen table, colourful, chaotic scenes of animals and trees and houses with too many windows. She started laughing at silly jokes, asking questions about my day, requesting bedtime stories. One night, about 8 months after Kate left, Mia crawled into bed next to me during a thunderstorm, her small body trembling, and whispered, "Can I stay here?" I wrapped my arms around her and said, "Always." A year passed, then 2, then 5. Kate never came back. She never called, never sent money, never even sent a birthday card. For the first couple years, I kept trying to track her down, filing missing person reports that went nowhere, hiring a private investigator I couldn't afford who found nothing. Eventually, I stopped. Whatever had happened to Kate, whether she'd run away deliberately, met with foul play, or simply decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore, Mia was mine now, not legally, not officially, but in every way that mattered. I became her parent. I went to every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every doctor's appointment. I taught her to ride a bike, to tie her shoes, to stand up to bullies. I held her when she cried about not having a real mum. And I didn't tell her that I felt like I wasn't enough. I just loved her as hard as I could and prayed it would be sufficient. Mia thrived. She made friends, joined the art club, got good grades. She called me Aunt Sarah at first, then just Sarah as she got older. And I never pushed for mum, even though part of me ached to hear it. By the time she turned 15, she was taller than me, with Kate's sharp cheekbones, but none of her restlessness. Mia was grounded, thoughtful, kind. She talked about going to college, becoming a graphic designer, travelling the world. She had dreams, and I was determined to help her achieve every single one. And then, on a cold Tuesday evening in November, 10 years after Kate had walked out my door, she walked back in. I was in the kitchen, making dinner, spaghetti. Mia's favourite, when I heard the knock. It was firm, deliberate, not the casual tap of a neighbour or delivery person. Something about it made my stomach clench. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. Kate stood there. She looked different, older, obviously, but also more put together. Expensive coat, professional haircut, makeup carefully applied. She looked like someone who had her life figured out, someone successful and confident. The exact opposite of the exhausted, chaotic woman who dumped her daughter on my doorstep a decade ago. Quote 28, she said, and her voice was calm, neutral, like she was greeting an acquaintance at a coffee shop. I couldn't speak. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. For 10 years, I'd imagined this moment. What I'd say, how I'd react. Sometimes I imagined screaming at her, demanding answers. Sometimes I imagined slamming the door in her face. Sometimes I imagined breaking down crying. But now that it was happening, I just stood there, frozen, staring at the stranger wearing my sister's face. Quote 29, she asked, already stepping forward. I moved aside automatically, muscle memory overriding shock. Kate walked into my apartment, our apartment, the one I'd bought 3 years ago with a mortgage that was slowly suffocating me, and looked around with the detached interest of a real estate appraiser. Her eyes swept over the framed photos on the walls. Mia at age 10, 12, 15. Mia's artwork hanging in the hallway. The collection of school awards on the bookshelf. And her expression didn't change. No recognition, no emotion, just cool assessment. Nice place, she said. You've done well for yourself. I finally found my voice. Where have you been? Around, Kate said, shrugging off her coat and draping it over the back of my chair like she owned the place. I had some things to work through. Personal stuff. You wouldn't understand. You left your daughter here for 10 years, I said, and my voice shook with suppressed rage. 10 years, Kate. No calls, no letters, nothing. I didn't know if you were dead or alive. I raised her. I paid for everything. And I'm grateful. Kate cut me off smoothly, like she was thanking me for watering her plants while she was on vacation. Really, I am. You did a wonderful job. But I'm back now, and I'm ready to take over again. The words hung in the air, heavy and incomprehensible. Take over. Like Mia was a project she'd temporarily outsourced. I whispered, Kate said, enunciating each word clearly, like I was slow to understand. Quote 41. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My hands started shaking, and I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. Quote 42. Quote 43, Kate said, and there was no warmth in her eyes, no acknowledgement of the insanity of what she was proposing. Quote 44, quote 45. I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Kate interrupted, and now there was steel in her voice. The words hit me like physical blows. She was right. In my desperation to keep Mia safe, to give her stability, I'd never formalized anything. I'd been terrified that involving the authorities would mean losing her to foster care, to the system, to somewhere worse than my cramped apartment. So I'd just kept her, raised her in legal limbo, always one bureaucratic inquiry away from losing everything. Kate, please, I said, and I hated how my voice cracked, how desperate I sounded. You can't do this to her. She's happy here. This is her home. You're her aunt, Kate said flatly. I'm her mother. End of discussion. The kitchen door swung open, and Mia walked in. She'd been in her room doing homework, earbuds in, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding in our kitchen. She pulled out one earbud and started to say, quote 53, and then she saw Kate. She froze. Her face went completely white, and for a moment she looked exactly like the terrified 8-year-old who'd sat on my couch 10 years ago, small and lost and afraid. Then something shifted in her expression. Not recognition, because I realized with a jolt that Mia probably didn't even remember what her mother looked like. Just a deep, instinctive understanding that something was very, very wrong. Kate said, and her voice softened for the first time, taking on a syrupy quality that made my skin crawl. Quote, I'm 5'5". Mia looked at her, then she looked at me. Then she looked back at Kate, and I watched something crystallize in her expression, a hardness I'd never seen before, a fierce, protective anger that made her seem suddenly much older than 18. No, Mia said. Her voice was quiet but absolutely steady. Kate blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. Honey, I know this is sudden, but no, Mia repeated, louder this time. She moved to stand next to me, and I felt her shoulder press against mine, solid and reassuring. I'm not going anywhere with you. I don't even know you. You're not my mother. Sarah is. She's the one who raised me, who took care of me, who was there for every single day of my life for the past 10 years. You're just nobody, a stranger. And I'm not leaving my real mum for a stranger. The words hung in the air. My real mum. and I felt tears streaming down my face before I even realised I was crying. Mia had never called me that before. Never. And now, in this moment, facing down the woman who'd given birth to her, she'd said it. She'd chosen me. Kate's face hardened. You're confused, Mia. That's understandable, given how long I've been gone, but legally, I'm 18, Mia interrupted, and there was something fierce and triumphant in her voice. I turned 18 3 months ago. You missed it, by the way. Sarah threw me a party, all my friends came, it was perfect. But the point is, I'm a legal adult, which means you can't make me do anything. I choose where I live, who I consider a family, and I choose Sarah. I choose home. The silence that followed was deafening. Kate's mouth opened, then closed. Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, frustration, and finally, cold calculation. She was doing the math, realising that the legal leverage she'd counted on had evaporated the moment Mia became an adult. Fine, Kate said finally, her voice clipped and professional, all pretense of motherly warmth stripped away. Stay here then, live your little life. But don't come crying to me when you realise what you've given up. I could have given you opportunities, connections, a real future, but you'd rather stay here, she gestured dismissively at our modest apartment, with her. She grabbed her coat and headed for the door. Then she paused, looked back at me with something like contempt, and said, You always were too soft, Sarah. Too willing to take in strays. I hope she's worth it. And then she was gone. Again. The door clicked shut. And this time I knew it was final. She wouldn't be back. She'd gotten what she came for. Absolution, maybe, or just confirmation that she could walk away cleanly, and now she'd move on to whatever came next in her carefully reconstructed life. I turned to Mia, and she was crying too, silent tears streaming down her face. I pulled her into my arms, and she collapsed against me, her tall frame somehow fitting perfectly into my embrace like it had 1,000 times before. Quote, 68, I whispered into her hair. Quote, 69, quote, 70, Mia said fiercely, her voice muffled against my shoulder. Quote, 71. We stood there for a long time, holding each other in our kitchen, while the spaghetti water boiled over on the stove and smoke alarms started beeping. Eventually, we'd clean up the mess, order pizza instead, and spend the evening watching terrible reality TV on the couch like we did every Tuesday night. Normal. Home. Safe. 10 years ago, my sister left her daughter with me and vanished. She came back to take what she thought was hers. But she'd miscalculated. Mia was never hers to take, she was mine. Not because of blood or law, but because of love, sacrifice, and 10 years of showing up every single day. And when it mattered most, Mia knew exactly where she belonged.